I used to be a horse trainer. I used to be a riding instructor. Until the day I realized that somewhere I had gone off course. My days were filled with training horses, teaching lessons, and judging competitions. I was good at what I did. I could teach my students how to control their horses. But there was something lost in that process. I looked back at pictures and drawings from my childhood. In the beginning, there was a passion that drew me to horses, a closeness I felt with these gracious beings. Where had the beauty, majesty, and freedom of horses gone? I started to dream. If I could go and meet anyone in the world, who would it be? I looked at the books that inspired me and made a wish list of the authors I wanted to meet. These people broke with tradition and focused more on what we can learn from horses than what we can teach them. I made a choice to leave behind the life I knew. I sold my ranch to fund this search, bought a video camera and plane tickets, and set out to find a different way of doing things. My first stop was Colorado, to meet Mark Rashid, a tough-looking cowboy with a black belt in Aikido, who talked about passive leadership, softness, and the value of a still mind.
I was born down in Texas in the spring of '58. Built for a working man, guess that's just my fate. Cowboy from Colorado, for me he gives 6 months pay. Cinched me to the back of his horse, went to work that very day.
The boss in the herd can be referred to as the alpha horse. And a lot of people refer to that as the one we want to emulate. And if you've ever spent any time around any large herds of horses, it's real easy to find the alpha horse, the boss horse, because they're generally off by themselves, because the other horses don't want to be around them. So for me, I don't know why I would want to emulate that behavior in relationship to training and working with horses. But in a herd of 30 horses, there will be 29 followers and 1 leader, and the leader is generally an older mare, say in a wild herd. Stallions come and go, but mares stay for life. And so it's not necessarily going to be the bossy mare, it's going to be the one with all the life experience. It's the leader that can be trusted, whether it's with people or with horses. The way to develop trust is through consistency. If you're consistent, then you're dependable. If you're dependable, you become trustworthy. If you're trustworthy, the horse will be at peace with you, and if the horse is at peace with you, they can become soft. Softness comes from the inside of the horse or the person. Lightness is just on the outside. You can achieve lightness through training, meaning you can get a lot of things done, and they look really good right up until they get into a new situation. We see horses all the time that people will refer to as soft or light, and they'll bring them into a new clinic. Everything's going fine at home, and they bring them into a new situation and everything unravels. With lightness, the things that are trained into the horse are available when things are going relatively well. With softness, everything is available all the time. The softness that I'm referring to is the feel that the horse has when they're out on the pasture by themselves. In Japanese, there's a term, mizu no kokoro, which means a mind like still water. And if the mind is still, so if in the morning you go out and there's a pond out there and there's no wind and it's real still, the water's like a mirror. The mind is the same way. If you develop a mind like still water, that reflection becomes very clear. If your mind is still like that, things become a perfect reflection of what they really are instead of us assuming there's something else. Through training, we take all the softness out of the horse and we spend the rest of our lives trying to put it back in. And it's there, it's still there. We just have to look for it and develop it and nurture it and bring it out. It's ongoing, it's a journey that's going to take you all your life and maybe even longer than that. But it's good work if you can get it.
My next trip was to Southern California to see Carolyn Resnick. Her book, Naked Liberty, was a memoir of her years growing up and living with wild horses as a girl in the 40s and 50s. She seemed to have found a way to connect with horses in a way that made them fall in love with her.
Horses, when they're in captivity, are missing out on their activities of being with the herd. And it's my desire that we fill those needs for our horses. There's two activities horses share in a herd, and that's sharing space doing nothing and being together doing something. And there has to be a balance, just like in our own lives. We have to have a balance between meditation and a balance between activity to feel well-being. So if we can give that to our horse, that we are present. And just being around the barn isn't enough. You want to go to the horse and say, I'm here to be with you. For years, music has led my way to connecting with horses, and probably happened for me inadvertently. I didn't really know that listening to music was going to connect me with horses, but I love music and I loved horses. And in my training center, I played music when I was training horses, and all of a sudden I noticed that the horses were listening to the music too. The horse has desire to be in unity and harmony and match your movements exactly to feel safe in a community, because that's what horses do. They actually match each other's movements because it feels good. And if you think about it, in our culture we have the same thing because we dance and we dance together. So we actually dance together because it feels good to share united movements.
In the book The Tao of Equus, author Linda Kohenov wrote about how to experience things from the horse's perspective, using emotions as a language. I found her in the Arizona desert and asked her about how she discovered this.
I got Rasa, my Arabian mare, as a 2-year-old because I wanted to train a horse from the ground up who wasn't jaded, who wasn't abused. I wanted to find a different way of doing things. And my goal was to have a horse who could do some dressage and also do some extended trail riding, because my goal was to get as far away as possible from the human race on a regular basis. And what I found instead was that my mare actually had a pretty serious stifle injury and had to be off from riding pretty extensively. By that time I was really connected with her, and so I had to find ways to be with her and have a fulfilling relationship with her on the ground, and not necessarily running her around in small circles or lunging her or doing all kinds of fancy training moves, because her leg just couldn't handle it at that time. And so we spent long hours roaming the desert, spending time in the pasture, getting to know each other and hanging out together and all of that. So that was really the start of understanding that being with a horse and being fulfilled in a relationship with a horse didn't have to be about riding. I had this odd experience when I was out in the pasture with Rasa one day, and my other horse Noche was out there too, and there was a herd of horses, and I was standing under a beautiful tree on a beautiful October afternoon, pretty much just like today, with that luminescent blue sky, and Rasa and I were breathing in sync, and we were doing a little grooming, and and just going into this expansive meditative state that you get into with horses when you don't have an agenda. And in the distance, I noticed my horse Noche lift up his head suddenly, and before he could turn and run toward me, what I felt was a huge shock wave fly through the air at a considerable distance and cause my gut to constrict. And the hair rose up on the back of my neck. And I was poised to run at the same moment all the other horses were. And then I looked at what was going on, because at that point I thought, well, what could really be that scary on a beautiful October afternoon? And I realized it was a mountain biker. And I realized from a horse's point of view, that would be pretty scary, because he had a helmet on that was shaped like the head of the creature from Alien. And he had on this fluorescent blue shirt and these electric socks with skulls on them. And he was slithering by really fast, not making steps, but moving like a snake would. And it struck me as so funny that I started to laugh, because I could really see what a mountain biker would look like from a horse's perspective. And I was just about to turn around and tell my horses everything was okay, and they had already gotten that message from me, because they saw me relax and they felt my amusement. And so they had already come back up, and they were looking at him too, like, oh, yeah, that is kind of funny, isn't it? And I realized that emotion travels through the air like sound, and that horses pick up on it as a language, and that once I was in the horse space of being tuned with them and the environment, that I could begin to use emotion as a language too.
While I was in Arizona, Linda was preparing to hold a workshop with artist Kim McElroy about the horse as a source of inspiration. Kim arrived just before I left, and I had a chance to ask them both about the role of the horse as a muse.
I've been fascinated by them from the time I could crawl, I think. And I played horse as a child, as many girls did, some of us on our hands and knees. And I can never really say why I began becoming fascinated with them as a child, because I didn't have exposure to horses. It's like they've always been in me. They're a part of my soul, and I think when I began doing art is when I could really feel more a kinship with them. They just seem so powerful and free, and yet they have such an amazing kinship with humans, where they really still themselves and become tamed. I think just being around something that's a mystery, that you can't, necessarily speak with or get an answer from until you learn what those answers are, through their own body language and their behaviors and their the feelings you get when you're around them, and the various subtle modes of communicating with them that you learn. I'm so glad that that kind of subtlety is becoming something that people are seeking, because that's where you truly can get to know the horse. My art is really about that. It's about interacting with something that's not speaking back to you, but yet it triggers a lot of emotions in people.
Horses have long been associated with inspiration. In Greek mythology, Pegasus flies up to Mount Helicon, the mountain of the Muses, and he strikes his hoof on the ground, and the ground shakes and opens up, and out of that ground comes a spring called the Hippocrene, which simply means horse spring. And this spring spills down the mountainside and nourishes artists and poets who are willing to walk up to that summit for inspiration. And what I've noticed is that over the years, the people who learn how to ride and interact with horses in respectful ways, it's like a spring of inspiration opens up inside of them, because they get in touch with a vast source of inspiration, which is that other 90%, all of those levels of nonverbal communication, interaction with your body, sensitivity to the environment and to others. When that opens up through working with a horse, it's like a spring has started to flow inside of you, a spring of inspiration.
I don't think anything in my life up until this point could have prepared me for what I found when I met Klaus Ferdinand Hempfling. He was teaching a workshop at his farm on the windy little Danish island of Lø. The subjects he spoke about were things of legends and myths, of ancient wisdom, of bringing together two worlds. He spoke about what is required to truly connect with a horse, and as if he already knew my questions, he seemed to explain why working with horses could be disheartening and a source of so much frustration.
If we're looking back to our forefathers, they say that we have something like a realistic world, things you can see, things you can touch, things you can use, and things you might misuse. And we have something here on the other side which might be invisible. It's something like the dream world. It's something like the symbolical world. And wherever we're looking back to whatever kind of transmissions from the forefathers, from the Indians, from the Australians, from the Celtic people, from the Vikings, wherever, it's always the same. They're always talking about the same two subjects. They're always talking about the same line in between. And there's a funny thing, because wherever you are, they're always talking about one animal, which obviously has something to do with the borderline between these realistical, visible, touchable world and the other one, whatever it might be. The animal, wherever in the world they're talking about, is the horse. Our forefathers, they said only few people should even be together with horses. Not everybody. According to their wisdom, looking back into these times, it did need a lot in beforehand to be with the horse. If these kind of self-knowledge, self-awareness, awareness of your body, awareness of your energy, a lot of more things, if these kind of structures were not established inside of a person in the right way, if you are not bringing dream and realistic world, bringing this part of the world and the invisible part of the world together, they would not suggest to bring this person together with the horse, because the horse in this moment has the job to explain this very clear. You're not succeeding, it's not enough what you're doing, you're not reaching the point. Getting this information all the time. You're opening the door of the horse stable, the horse is coming, the horse is pushing, the horse is pulling, the horse wants to go to the left, you want to go to the right, means that the horse is always giving to this person the idea, you're not enough, you're not enough, you're not enough. What is the picture for the person? Finally, after weeks, months or years, I'm not enough, I'm not enough. This is a big danger. If you start to learn to play a guitar, you will learn the first day 2 and 3 notes, and they are sounding nice. In the next week you can play the first small song, and after 1 year you're starting to play in a party with friends already nice songs. It means under normal circumstances we have to take care that what we are doing is increasing energy, is increasing trust, and is increasing self-knowledge in a positive way. In the world of the horses, this is not the case. In the world of the horses, you will realize that frustration and negative feelings are the daily bread people eating.
Klaus taught us exercises to bring us into the present moment, which is where we needed to be in order to connect with a horse. He compared a horse to the ocean, something that we had to come into harmony with, unlike a guitar, an instrument created by man. Until I became aware of how horses mirrored the things in me that I needed to look at, I would continue to be frustrated by my expectations. The last person I went to visit I didn't find by reading his book. I saw his website. As I clicked through the pictures, I could hardly believe what I was seeing. Here were horses flying with invisible wings. This man, Alexander Nevzorov, a former war correspondent wounded in the line of duty, and a current governmental advisor, researcher, and historian, had found a way to be with horses who were free to express themselves in natural collection. When I read that he worked with the horses without using any punishment, force, or restrictions on the horses' heads, in complete liberty, something in me was shaken. How was that possible? That was when I knew Russia would be my next destination. Arriving in St. Petersburg, I was met by my guide and translator, Georgie. Georgie also happened to be a magazine photographer. We went to visit some of Alexander's students, and I saw them performing the beginning elements with patient and allowing attitudes, and horses who were always free to choose whether they wanted to participate. Our next stop was a Russian trail competition. The struggles between horse and rider could not have been more different than what I saw from Alexander's students. When we got back to Georgie's flat, he showed me some of the photographs he took for the Nevzorov Hotikol magazine. His job is to photograph the abuse that goes on in the horse world. His precise timing had captured the moments that are overlooked by those who think that these signs of resistance are an inevitable and even necessary part of working with horses in order to make them cooperate and bend to our will. When I saw these pictures, I saw myself in them. I saw the fear of loss of control. As hard as it was to look at and admit, I realized that it was a world I had become a part of. The horses were different, but the same pain was echoed over and over again. That was the point when I knew I had to break from it completely. On my last day in Russia, I finally met Alexander and asked him what could be done. As he spoke, all of the voices I had heard along this path started to speak as one.
When we come to a horse, we have to first completely take in account the physiological impression of our effect on her. We are mammals. We are all physiological beings. You're listening to me with very big interest. But if, right now, we put in your pocket some burning coal, no matter how interesting I am, you will be running, screaming, and jumping around your camera, but not listening to me. Everything in us, mammals, has a great dependency on physiological feelings. And the art of speaking horse language is firstly a skill to not cause her physiological discomfort or pain. We did study together with physiologists, with vets, and forensic scientists on the effect of bits on the horse's mouth. It was found out that the effect of the bits with a jerking force exceeds 300 kilograms per square centimeter, with the typical pull being 80 to 150 kilograms per square centimeter. All of these experiments were documented and signed by the very best Russian experts. In the past, people didn't know what they are doing. Trainers, professional riders, they would say, "It's all right. Look how big the horse is. You can't hurt her. It's not that painful for her." But actually, these devices act on a very small area of the horse's head, and it's all wired with nerves, which can generate a hell of a lot of pain. Those who want to know about it, they can, but they still keep on doing it. They want to have fun. Besides that, there were scientific, physiological experiments carried out on the tissue of horses' back. Although myology and muscle construction is almost the same with everyone, there are nuances. There are differences in innervation and thickness of muscle tissue, of course, but the compression of muscle and the trauma that it's done to the muscle, it's almost the same for every single mammal. By some difficult experiments, it was identified that the main muscles of the horse's back react without pain to the weight of the rider for the first 12 to 15 minutes. 15 minutes at the longest. After 15 minutes, feelings of discomfort begin. Microcirculation gets compromised, and within 20 minutes we get symptoms similar to what you would get in your leg when you sit on it for long enough in an awkward position. It's a signal of serious violation of circulation. Within 20-25 minutes we get anemia and strong destructive processes in the muscle itself that are quite dramatic from the point of view of physiology.
The information was startling. How could I have studied horses for so many years and not realize what was going on physiologically? I started to look for confirmation of this research. I talked to a veterinarian who is an expert in ultrasound. Her report showed that in nearly all of the horses pre-screened for back injuries, ultrasound revealed significant damage to the structures of the back. I looked at thermograms, which showed areas of inflammation in the backs of horses who were ridden. I looked in veterinary texts and journals and saw that even with the best fitted saddle, the pressure of the rider and the tightened girth was well beyond what the horse's back tissue could carry without compromised circulation and pain, beginning after only a few minutes. I now understood the necessity of bits and other devices to control the horse's head. They provide a way for the rider to offer the horse a choice. Either the horse can do what the rider demands, or they face the greater pain of a tug in their mouth or on their head, a bony area covered with thin skin and a network of sensitive nerves. Even horses who have been trained to go bridleless, if they were trained with a bridle, they have learned that the consequences of disobeying the rider's requests will be far worse than accepting the discomfort in their back, which soon enough will go numb. I went to a few local horse shows and started looking with new eyes. I would never dream of inflicting this kind of pain on a human, or even a dog or a cat. What made it okay to do this to a horse? Now that I had seen what could be accomplished without punishment or force, I could no longer call this training. I had to call it abuse. The requirements for working with Alexander were to give up bits, competitions, and anything that wasn't in the horse's best interest, including riding for at least a year, in order to develop the relationship on the ground and to allow the horse's back time to heal. Letting go of bits and competitions was relatively easy once I opened my eyes and saw what was going on. But to give up riding? Looking at his horses, there was no denying that he had found a different way. I realized I could never have a true partnership with my horses if I was unwilling to give up control through pain. If I was going to continue along this path, it would have to be on my own 2 feet.
The truth is that all of the confrontation between us and the sportsman, it fits into one small phrase. We know and believe that the horse is absolutely conscious, that she has amazing intelligence, but others don't believe it. That's where the bits and bozal and hackamore arise, and people have a relationship with the horse like she's a scary, mysterious, living piece of meat which you can use for your own pleasures.
There are a lot of things that happen when we start to realize what horses need to be healthy emotionally, as well as physically, and even spiritually. And there's a lot of things that human beings have done with horses over the centuries when we thought they were virtual machines, or that they didn't have feelings, or that they didn't need families and herds and friends to be happy.
Horses get abused because it works so well. If you take a horse and you force a horse, he will give in and he will do what he's told. And so that brings an important question up, and that is, just because we can as human beings, should we? When you're training a horse, when I'm talking about reprimanding a horse for behavior, if we reprimand him for something that we wanted him to do, that is a self-serving act. And upon reprimanding a horse for not doing something we need, like bigger movements in piaffe or passage or whatever the problem is that we're having, generally we'll correct it incorrectly because it came from a self-serving need. How to correct that behavior is to understand that when we're on the back of a horse, we're in the horse's home. It's an invitation. We must, when we're in the horse's home, be really respectful and follow what is etiquetely right, and it's not telling the horse how to be.
The inner will of a horse to perform, to live, to enjoy each second, shown by a high performance, by a big energy which is produced. This picture is very quickly converted into something which looks somehow gray, which looks somehow heavy, sad. So the horses, they're stopping dancing. Nothing is alive anymore. It's like people sitting on a being where they can feel why they're not dancing anymore, why they are not playing anymore, why they are not showing these beautiness like they do it in wilderness. This is the reason why we started, obviously in the beginning, to be with the horses.
I started along this path full of excitement and hope that I would find something better than what I already knew. I went around the world to meet people who I thought held a secret. Yet I found myself faced with something I hadn't expected. I gave up my source of income, my national titles, teaching and judging engagements all over the country. For what? To sit around with my horses? It was utterly humbling as my former students went on to other trainers, and they and fellow boarders would watch as I sat in the arena with the horse facing away from me, not showing the slightest interest in wanting to be with me. I felt like the horse, now given a choice, was passing judgment, and I was found unworthy. In that darkness, there was something that told me to keep going, that the way forward was through that door of abandonment. There was something within myself that I still needed to find. I started to listen more closely to what I was hearing.
Partnership begins at home, in the biggest sense of the word, at home in your own body. Recognizing that your body is the horse that your mind rides around on. In the past, we've treated our bodies like we would treat an unruly horse. We would rein in our instincts and our emotions and our intuition and mistrust it and treat it like it was not at all a source of wisdom. Horses just want you to be authentic. If you have some abuse in your background and you have some unresolved grief and anger about it, and you start to let that out in a constructive way and begin to really be present with that, they're willing to be present with you. But they're not holding on to that anyway, because if the next moment you're authentically happy or authentically peaceful, they're interested in that too.
At Linda's, I worked with her mare Rasa, or maybe Rasa was working with me. I learned that by not being afraid to fully experience whatever was happening, the horse naturally wanted to connect. I thought of how little I understood my emotions. How could I let them be my guides? I began to realize that this path wasn't about how to do more things with horses. It was about connecting to a greater power within. I saw how horses could lead us on a path between external and internal realities. It was a way of stepping out of the world we humans have created and into theirs, to experience the world in a different way.
What you're wanting to do is to make a connection and then understand what it means to stay within the connection, and that it's okay to have disagreements with your horse, and it's okay to tell your horse what he needs to do for you. The part that is not okay is making your horse do something for you. So the connection doesn't always look like peace, harmony, and love. Sometimes it looks like a whole host of emotional expression. But emotions and connection and disconnection is perfectly fine to have with your horse if it's done in a free environment. So if you ask your horse to do something and he turns around, kicks up in the air, runs around and leaps and squeals and leaps and squeals, you just let him leap and squeal all he wants. It's just that he's to do it on his turf rather than yours, so that means you would just keep him away from you and allow him his expression, and after he's said everything he wants, he'll come back and just fit in your pocket. But you won't know that unless you try it. That's what freedom is about. It's about experimentation, because the thing that's so interesting about horses, they're the most forgiving animal on the planet. They're young. You can always take a horse that, he can be 21 years old, and you can change that horse that day to an entirely different understanding of life. They're so flexible. So sometimes it's better just to go ahead and have the disagreements and allow your horse to be who he is and experience the no factor. As long as he's given freedom, he will always come back and experience a different side of himself that will fit into your pocket, into unity, into harmony, and everything you want. But it's about speaking your truth and staying the truth. Once you've experienced how you feel inside, you can make the adjustments to be who you knew you needed to be. But you've got to experience it first.
If you can control the horse in a nice way, not in a way of abusing, putting them down, no, controlling them in a dancing, in a ballet, in a way of of understanding, cooperating and communicating. This is a signal that you are starting to become conscious about these important parts of yourself.
When a person decides that motivation by force, pain, or threats of pain are no longer acceptable, something else must be found. A new level of creativity is demanded of the human. This budding of creativity is so fragile, especially when working with an animal that can be as powerful and intimidating as a free horse. I began to see the prison I had created around myself, needing to control the circumstances in my life in order to feel safe. As I started to dismantle these psychological bars, the horses seemed to come alive.
What do we have in common? What makes all good horse trainers able to be so successful with horses that are difficult? It's because we're comfortable with not knowing what we're doing.
It is very difficult to say what I use or what I don't use. It all sort of happens in the most natural way, coming out from the personality. In a way, it's a process that's not dependent on myself.
I don't have a preconceived notion of where I want to go. Then I would be so focused on that I would miss the flowers on the sides. I think it used to be at one time about what I can do with the horse, but it's not that way for me anymore. There's a certain way that I'm trying to go through my life, and over the years there's been a shift for me in that it isn't about me and the horse. It's about what the horse is bringing to the table that can help me get to where I need to go.
You don't need to put horses in different category. They're not aliens. They're exactly as we are. They're the same kind of mammal. We are similar in almost every physiological parameter. And also it's quite dangerous to put a horse into some cosmic range of incredible and unseen alien as to put her down to a mere piece of sports equipment. But a close, noble and concerned relationship with any living creature always gives you amazing results. Everything in life, everything that lives in this world has the same rights for life, for freedom, love, happiness, and a horse gives these possibilities to the human. You only have to hold your hand out. You just have to understand that the secret of relationship with the horse is that you just stop being a creature that is allowed to give somebody pain, to take somebody's life, to give somebody sorrow. You get into a completely different position.
What you could see here when I'm together with the horses, and which is giving you this idea, there is something special. It's not a method. There is, in reality, something special. But the entrance to do this is for many years only one question. You would like to add something from this supermarket of energy to become easily stronger, to become nicer, to become famous, to become better. And the problems you're creating will become bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Or you're really allowing yourself to be the weakest being on the world. This is what I am. And to finally, on the end, being led, being weak, being like a leaf in the river, The river is strong, but if I'm a leaf in the river, I'm going the way down to the ocean. So the first thing coming home, understanding something from horses, from the world, from authenticity, is to lay down, to relax and stop doing something, because we are doing too much, we are doing too much, we are doing too much. This is the first entrance.
At the clinic, I watched Jasmine, a woman who's a professional, making her living with horses. As Klaus was working with her, I knew he had been speaking just as much about my own life.
Because as a professional, you're expecting something from you, you're expecting something to teach, you're expecting things instead of being. We have a picture of the horse riding, coming, standing, being calm, and we are disappointed. The horse is not there, piaffing, or whatever the horse should do. This means that the picture is always negative. Wherever the horse is, it's negative. And the starting point is to get rid of this. Being can't be professional. Being is complete. It's in the nighttime, in the daytime, it's living, it's a complete thing. You remember of the age of 6? Stay there. Stay in the age of 6. And go back with these pictures. And do with your horse what you would do. And then let's see what's coming out. He's strong inside and soft outside. Not decided. Okay? I would like you to be strong, clear, and soft. Anything else of these movements will kick the horse away from you. You can drag the horse, you can do a lot of things, but the horse from inside will not come. So, just, it's not necessary to move. The horse will leave. The head can be like this. Going back to the picture, closing your eyes. Jasmine, closing your eyes. And being this 6-year-old girl, in her way of being decided, her way of being strong, her way of being. And go on, and even wilder, because it's so nice. You don't have school, you don't have anything. Yes, and get rid of everything. Yes, like this. Okay, okay. And now even a bit more in the same elegance how you do it, but even a bit more because you have the whole field for you. The whole world is waiting for you. And you are waiting for the world. Yes. Shall I come to you? Are you promising to continue like this? Yes, I'm promising. This is me. This is the young child in me. You want to abuse me? You want to do the same thing with me like people have been doing with you and yourself with you? Look how soft we are. Look how weak we are. Look how weak you are. Then I'm coming to you. And then I'm there. And then I'm opening. I'm with you. This is what I can do for you.
Thank you.
Now you see the horse like the horse is, Yasmin. A young, small girl with a lot of dreams, still with a lot of dreams. She would like to connect with this young girl, find out what is still there. And from here on, with this feeling, you could be like the leaf in the river. No job. No profession, being, feeling, seeing, and the next step will be offered from her.
If we look at the animal for what they are, they have a whole lot more to offer us than we do to them. It's that idea of being humble. If you come from that place, then you don't drop down to it. That idea of what do we have to offer the horse starts way up here somewhere, when we really need to be way down here. You know, allowing the information that the horse is trying to bring to us, allowing that to come through. Horses are so subtle, so incredibly subtle, that we are light years away from what they can do. We aren't even scratching the surface.
They've carried us around on their backs for centuries, waiting for us to notice that they aren't here just to help us evolve in terms of mastering nature and moving around the planet. They're actually waiting for us to get to the point where we're ready to evolve to a higher level of consciousness and awareness.
Coming home, I watched and rewatched the video footage and spent long hours simply being with my horses, allowing the message to sink in more deeply. I found that the beginning of this path was about letting go of what I thought I knew about teaching, training, riding, and life. It required an openness, responsibility, and willingness to create a better life for the ones we love, even sometimes at the expense of our own pleasures. The rains came, new grass pushed through the earth, and I found myself walking in this field, filming the horses playing in the water. I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. This feeling didn't happen because I went chasing after it and caught it. It was a gift, a glimpse of what it's like to experience each moment. In all my travels, I saw that the most important journey we can take is to go within and see ourselves for who we really are. The more freedom within ourselves, the more freedom the horses have, and the more we are awake to the source of life. The horses are our reflections.
We know really well that every horse has an amazing personality, that they have intellectual and psychological gifts, that they are clever. As soon as you treat them as conscious creatures, they respond right away. You don't need any talent, special abilities, or magic. It's absolutely elementary.
The real potential of this work in the future is for people to really learn how to open up and thrive and become more creative, learn how to become more fluid and adaptable, learning how to dance not just with horses but dance with life, learning how to expand relationships, and learning how to expand creativity and leadership on all levels.
Once our mind is quiet and still, and we can see things for what they really are, then we can start to develop that softness in us. And for me, it comes from the heart. It doesn't come from the hands. It comes from the heart. It's something that you have to want to do. It's not something that you can achieve through technique. Developing softness comes from a willingness to want to do no harm.
At some point, life becomes totally autonomous, to where it's only between you and the connection. It's something you don't share with someone else. It can't, it's too personal. And we could be looking at the same mountain, but we don't experience the same mountain.
Small, small things. One leaf touched by the sun, one small smell. When we are dying, I promise you, the memories you will have in your last seconds is about these small things, touching our skin, one leaf, one moment with your child, not the big things you will remember. The small things, these small things are added to a fulfilled life or not. Not the big things.
Maybe you're asking yourself some questions. Maybe you see things a little differently now. The next step is up to you. Return to what you know, or find a path where you can join in the dance.
In your dreams I called out to you, waiting long between the worlds. Can you see me? Tell me truly, do you know who's here with you? Use my wings when yours are hidden. Ride with me and hear our song. Share your love and let me be. Then you and I can fly as one. Searching for the boundless spaces, crying with the wind in the night, sharing joy in unknown places. Hear the silence deep inside. Searching for the boundless spaces, crying with the wind in the night, sharing joy in unknown places. Hear the silence deep inside. If you want to run with me now, first you must be where I am. We can find what you've forgotten. Open, let the magic in. Set me